All right, 9 a.m. Let's roll. Representative Bohm, would you like to do the pledge? Okay, let's. Good to be back. Gonna knock out our very last public hearing. Yay!
Yay.
Um, going to open up the public hearing for House Bill 1150. Recognize Representative Wood for the purpose of introduction of the bill. Representative Wood, welcome back to election law.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome back as yourself and welcome fellow board members. I'm introducing HB 1150, makes two minor changes. One that's in the main piece here, removing political advertising printed in newspapers, periodicals, or billboards shall be marked at the beginning or the end thereof. Political advertising. There's also an amendment coming down that I believe we should have by the time we do our session to also make it clear that the sole responsibility for this information is the candidate's campaign, political committees, party, causes, and other individuals or entities purchasing advertising for compliance. The only thing I want to add is maybe a bit of the story. Mostly everybody knows this case. There was a person who owned a $40,000 newspaper that was brought up on charges for failing to do this over several years. It was interesting because at the time she wasn't running, and these were local elections. They weren't really big news elections. They were, I believe, planning board and school board. So there was a lot of confusion on this, and it ended up that she got charged, and a lot of people felt that this just didn't make any sense for the all the problems that people think are going on in the state. These are the things we find time to charge people for. So um, I believe probably people here know more of the story than I do. So I will open it up to any questions. Or thank you.
Further, any questions from the committee? This might be the easiest one. Representative Lane.
I'm sorry. I guess how she got charged. The paper got charged, or
The-
the woman who ran the ad.
A good question. Thank you. The woman got charged from reading reviewing it last night. I've heard bits and pieces of the story, but the woman got charged. Yes. And I think that was the big part of the confusion was she obviously was confused. I don't know how many times I've read through what I need to do for signs and everything, and I get confused. But there seemed to be confusion on who the responsibility was. That was a big part of the case.
So we're all on the same page. Print advertisement in newspapers has a additional burden in that if you're running an ad specifically in a newspaper, you have to run the paper has to run a disclaimer on top of the ad that says paid political advertising. And that's on top of the disclaimer that should already be in the ad. So in this particular case, it's very interesting. The owner of the paper was warned 3 times to run that part and just kept not doing it. So the question is that we'll work on this obviously in exec and maybe even actually in our work session since we're already cracking this RSA open. Um, is that actually required if we're already having a disclaimer? If the disclaimer is already required on the ad, why does the newspaper then need to run an additional thing up top? Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I apologize because I walked in a minute late, and I heard that you had mentioned that there was an amendment coming forward to maybe handle this specific issue. I am unaware. But what was the purpose for deleting billboards from this?
That's a good question. I believe in this section of the statute, it's all about the rates. So it didn't seem to make sense to have any reference to adding political advertising or some kind of mark on identificator on the billboard or anything in this category. There's another section that clearly covers what needs to be on print. And as I believe what, as the chairman said, it seemed like this is an additional burden that is only for newspapers. And if you read this section, it really just talks about rates and fixing rates with the Secretary of State. And on the top, it says, by the way, add this as well, identify it as well. So it didn't seem to make that much sense there. And just to clarify, there was two problems with this, whether that mark needed to be there because other identifiers were there, and who was responsible for it. So the amendment, I believe, will be out by our session, will have something about making it specific to the candidate. And the last thing, in case you didn't hear it, these were not statewide elections, they were local elections.
Thank you.
And the good news is, because we're doing our work session later today, which will address this entire section of law, we will be able to effectively talk about it later. Representative Hamlet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for taking my question. I always get hung up on the grammar, and sometimes I miss the point of the bill. But anyway, in the section after the lined out section where it says rates for advertising shall be filed, shouldn't we put with the Secretary of State right there rather than down below? Because the rest of the sentence, no later than 30 days prior to the deadline for filing for office for an election. Well, I think we filed for office with the town clerk. But so I'm just saying it, I think it would be more clear. I'm asking you if it would be more clear if we put shall be filed with the Secretary of State. It should be up there.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I believe you're correct. This type of writing is pretty much in many of our state statutes. And when you try to look through it, if you try to file logically, you'll find that the person or the thing that has to be done is, about 4 lines into the sentence. So I wouldn't have a problem with doing that. Basically, it was just to show how simple this bill was going to change. We really weren't going to change it by much. So.
Okay.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative Wood. Only pink card we have today is Catherine Langle. Representative Howard, can you grab that blue sheet for me? Representative Wood will do the dirty work.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Langell, and I am 20 years old from Concord. I'm representing Open Democracy, and Open Democracy does oppose this bill on the grounds just that it would the language that's kind of being deleted would the standards that it's kind of getting at would not. I don't know. Sorry, I'm waking up. My language skills are not there yet. In terms of the amendment that was being talked about, it sounds good to me because it's trying to get at more specific standards across media types. And that is what I talk about in my written testimony, which y'all have eyes, you can read. I'm not gonna kind of get at those themes today. I do mention the case that was mentioned by Representative Wood and discussed about by Representative Lane, and those standards that were set by that case and the expectations that were set by that case and considerations that we should think about. So on those grounds, striking this language would be detrimental to the integrity of our campaign processes and the already fragile system of media messaging that our society relies so heavily on. But I do like the themes that we're trying to get at in terms of standardizing expectations for media and political persuasion ideas. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Representative Wood, you may not participate. You introduced the bill. I'm sorry. But if you, I'm sure if you leaned over, Representative Bowe might ask your question for you, but I can't allow you to do it.
I'm also happy to talk with people after this.
I am sure you would. It's nothing. It's just one of those weird procedural things. I agree, especially since you're on opposite sides. If you're on the same side, I might be a little more lenient. But I just have one question, if no one else has any other questions, which is that we already require a disclaimer in the actual ad.
Yeah.
So if I run the ad, like, why do we have to list political advertisement on top of it when the disclaimer has to be in the ad anyways?
Sure. In my mind, it's a matter of addressing things as, what they are. And to me, it comes down to media literacy skills. At least in today's society. Forever and a year ago, it might have been completely different. But today, it comes down to addressing things as what they are. Like when you go shopping, you have to acknowledge things as, like, I don't know, items or whatever. For this, it's a matter of like something that could be used to persuade someone. And to me, that standard kind of remains there. Yeah, at least that's what I perceive it as.
Okay, any further questions? Representative Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Did I hear you mention other media in your testimony? In other words, you would expand this beyond what's in the existing statute?
I mean, media goes beyond print, right? And print media is just one method of messaging, and I feel like those standards could be expanded. I mean, we're in campaign season now, and our radios and TVs and newspapers are flooded with local, state, and also national ads paid for by blank, 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 blank. And standardizing like what we expect of those candidates, local, municipal, and otherwise, would be nice. Because when you hear that message of paid for by blank, 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 you know it's official. So when you see on a newspaper like certain things, you know that it's not misleading or misinformation, because that sort of those terms are very poignant in today's sort of society, and I feel like it could be comforting to see standardized terms like that.
Okay, further questions from the committee? Oh, yes, Representative Bay. Sorry, but you are backlit from me. So if I don't see you, that's like you are. It's like
see
you're
my
literally like
angelic,
glowing because of the
halo?
sun behind you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask a twofer? Okay. This question is actually for specific to the billboard. I guess help me understand or if when I see a billboard, I already assume it's an ad.
Mhm.
Are there billboards that are not ads, or are we just distinguishing whether it's an ad, which every billboard is in my hand, versus a political ad?
I think that distinguishing would be good, because ads that are from a certain candidate versus ads that are from like an outside source. I mean, they're all political ads, so they would all need that distinguishment. But I mean, we all see advertisements and messages from like that are from different. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, folks. That are from different. Oh my gosh. I want to say sources, but that's so not it. Ads can come from all different places. So political ads are from different realms, I guess. I think realms would be the right word. So the candidate and their associates or whatever. And then also, I'm coming up with like an example. So like a cause that that candidate might support. That may not be a political ad or a politically based ad. So I guess you're right. No. Forget everything that I just said. You're right. Every billboard is an advertisement for the most part. It's just that distinguishment. I guess I forget everything I just said. I agree with you on that statement.
So, are you saying that the necessity of identifying whether it's a political ad or just a general ad has something to do with the lack of media literacy in general?
I mean, I think so. I think that understanding what types of messages that we take in every day is super important. And I think that acknowledging that and uh, acknowledging it for everyone to kind of see would be good, and standardizing that. Sorry, I hope that I'm able to get my message across. It's early.
That's it. I am also not a morning
you.
person, so I very much sympathize with that position of it's early. Which is ironic because I own a childcare center. You'd think I'd be up at like 5 a.m., but I am not. I'm there when it closes. I don't think I've ever opened it once. Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, folks.
Last up is Brennan McQuaid from the infamous New Hampshire Press Association, but really the union leader. We all know that.
Oh, good. Good morning. My name is Brendan McQuaid. I live in Manchester. I'm currently the publisher of the New Hampshire Union Leader, as Representative Barry stated, and I am the president of the New Hampshire Press Association. I'm here to speak on HB 1150. And is there an amendment pending on this?
The co-sponsor did indicate that an amendment is coming forward. Yes.
Gotcha. So I do support that amendment because I think it clarifies things a little bit better, but I will speak generally to this subject because I have learned in my past few years as publisher way more than I ever wanted to learn about campaign finance law and how it affects advertising because it's a bit of a nightmare. I don't know if you guys have read RSA 664. It's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible piece of legislation because you guys wrote it in little pieces over the past, 45 years. And I'm blaming all of you for this one. But it's a terrible piece of legislation. It's very confusing about what races it applies to, what it doesn't apply to, everything else. And I'm not sure if everyone knows the story of Deb Paul. Deb Paul is a woman who lives in Londonderry. She publishes a newspaper, a weekly newspaper down in Londonderry. She also served on the town council in Londonderry. She has not made many friends in doing that. And as part of her political activism, she was, for lack of a better word, targeted. And they used RSA 664 to target Deb Paul. The way they did it was by saying that she was running ads that did not meet the strict requirements under HB 664, including that they did not say political advertising at the top, even though I sat through the whole trial. No one ever said that they were confused that this was political advertising, much like your billboard question. It was obviously political advertising. But because this law says that it has to be labeled, she was arrested, she was charged, she was prosecuted by the AG's office, and she has since been found guilty and she has been fined, which is an outrageous position for a publisher in a free state like New Hampshire to be in. The attempt here was to make it so that that would not happen again. The amendment that is forthcoming is better, but even this one at least removes that political advertising requirement at the top, which people generally are not confused when something's political advertising. So that's what I'll say on the matter. I welcome any questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Hi, thank you. Am I correct in recalling that the advertisements did say something like political?
Some of them did,
some-
some of them didn't. They had a mix of messaging on them. And the reason why there's an amendment forthcoming is because the way this one is written would not actually address everything in Deb Paul because they tried to get her on everything. So it was that it didn't say political advertising at the top. It didn't say paid for by in the right way. So she may have said like paid for by friends of so-and-so. But if you read HB 664, which by the way is it's a law, the title of which is campaign finance. Why as a publisher am I looking at this law to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing in my job? But that being said, it says that in that law, it has to say political advertising at the top or the bottom, and it has to have paid for by with the name of the candidate or the treasurer or the chairman of the committee and a street address, which no one does. I mean, I've gone through and I've looked at our governor, the entire, but I'm saying no one does our governor, the entire executive council, all of our federal delegation. If you look at their ads, not their print ads, because we make them do it right, but their ads, say on TV or on Facebook, they're all technically illegal because it's a very confusing law. And what we're talking about in the Deb Paul case was ads that, if you read the law, it says that it only applies to these races. Oh, but then sometimes it applies to these races. So these were like school board races and town races that you would have to really read into it to understand that they apply. And so it was not only the political advertising, but also the paid for by and the way that it was put in. And so it was a technical violation, but no one was confused.
Mr. Quaid, you may be pleased to know that the reason I dragged my committee here on the sacred week of school vacation is we are going to be doing a work session at 10:30, rewriting the entirety of RSA 664 to make it more streamlined and transparent and easier to understand.
How many months did you give yourself?
We've actually been working on it for now 2 years, so 24 to be roughly precise.
Yeah,
And we are approaching the conclusion of that work. So you may want, if you're not busy, you may want to hang around because I get a feeling this will come up there.
Yeah, it is messy. And like I say, the fact that this is a campaign finance law would make you think that it applies to campaigns. But in the case of Deb Paul, they applied it to the publisher. So back to the billboard argument, if you're going to have a billboard, right? Well, are you going to arrest the guy who painted the billboard wrong because they didn't put it on there? And you start to apply it to everything else. Are we supposed to know the requirements of every single industry and everything that they're supposed to do within that industry, right? Regarding advertising, like the drug industry is supposed to have all these qualifications on their stuff. We get that stuff in. We assume that it's correct if it's coming from Pfizer or Merck or something like that, but we don't, we're not in a position to police the intricacies of that. But according to the AG's office and 664, they have put us in that position when it comes to campaigns.
Yes, Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. McQuaid. You may not, parts of this statute require a filing of rates in the Secretary of State's office, and parts of it say that you can't discriminate among political parties or whatever in the rates that you charge. Do you think that kind of law is necessary? Is that something that went on and so the statute was addressing it? Or is that, because I wasn't around when it happened, and is it something that we should maybe address? And I know that's not necessarily technically the topic of this statute, but
No.
I would like your input.
No, it's not in there. And if I'm recalling correct from the version of the amendment that I've seen, it's not in there either. It's specifically about the advertising display, not about filing your rates, which we've done because that was another thing that they tried to ding Deb Paul on. We made sure that they were there. We're sure that we've done it a million years ago, but it doesn't specify how often you're supposed to do it. Is it every race? Is it, anything else? So our rates haven't changed. They're still there. They're on file. And we make sure, which is tricky with advertising sales reps, to make sure that there's no discounting, there's nothing else, so that everyone's paying the same rate. That's very important. It's, I know from having been on the buying side of advertising for TV that is what goes on in the state. And yeah, I would suggest keeping that in there, maybe not having it buried within the campaign finance law, have it as its own section, so that it's clear to people who would be looking for things that apply to them that it is something that does apply to them.
Representative Rafter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. In this day and age, do you think we should be adding social media rates to the list of advertising rates that are here? I know that a lot of campaigns now, mine included, have used social media. So it seems like that's an omission.
Yeah, so social media is a very difficult thing, and you know, the publishing of newspaper and TV rates and radio rates are pretty fine because they're easy things to quantify. They're very quantifiable, right? We can put in column inches, you can put in time for TV and time for radio. The way that digital advertising is sold, and one of the things that really keeps me up at night is we display digital advertising on our site, right? It comes through resellers and it comes through Google. We don't see those ads. It's not like we get a whole, you know, output of the ads and it's like, hey, can make sure these are all good. We only see them when they're on the site, and we may not even see them just because of the nature of the way social media and digital advertising works. You get an ad that's different than I get, that's different than Representative Barry gets, because the social media and the, you know, big tech is looking at everything you do and trying to identify, yeah, we think you might like this ad, so we're going to serve that to you. So those ads are sold on an entirely different basis. And the way that they are sold, you're never going to be able to nail down pricing, which is not great, right? It means that a big player can probably get better rates because they're buying volume than a small player. I don't think you're have at it. I say, you know, I'm not here defending Facebook or anyone else, but I think it is important. Just the challenges of the way digital media works are infinite.
Representative Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm curious how much the fine was, both in dollar amount and how much is it relative to the net worth of the publication?
So the fine that they wanted was, I think, $500 per charge. This is you can look it up. We've run stories and others have run stories that detail it. I think she ended up paying just over $500 total. They pulled everything together, maybe $600. But you know, in terms of the net worth of the publication, I think they stated she makes about $35,000 a year. So you can imagine that's a huge chunk of her income that is going towards not just that, but you know, she had to get a lawyer, she had to pay legal fees, she had to do all of that, which the AG actually cited as, it was shocking, cited that, you know, other people got better deals because they had just pled guilty, and you know, the judge actually had to say, hey, are you giving her a hard time for exercising her constitutional right to a defense in this case? Oh, no, of course not. Yeah. But the judge also called me out personally, so I guess I'm a little biased.
What an honor. Further questions from the committee? I have a question. So this whole, while we're in the section of that RSA, I don't think your dream of getting it moved to another section of RSA would happen. That being said,
We know it's there now.
yeah, everyone knows it's there now. Would you can speak either on behalf of yourself, your publication, or the NHPA, but would you be amenable if we just struck this whole section and said you can't charge differential rates from candidate to candidate or party to party?
So, like I say, I'm in favor of that as a notion, and I think that the majority of, or a lot of in-state advertising is traditional means, and I personally, having been on the campaign side, I hate the idea that I would, you know, go down to a radio station and wouldn't know that they're charging these guys different rates and these guys different rates, and I think it's important that that exists.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. It's always good to have a proud Ward 6 business in here. I do represent Ward 6, so
And we appreciate it.
I'm some days more than others, maybe. Any other people signed up to speak? I don't
Can you
see.
do something about the motorcycle? I'll talk to you later.
Any other people wish to speak? Seeing none, we have no one on the blue sheet. And online we had. I just had it up and I closed it. I don't know why I did that. Online, we had 2 in support, 11 opposed, 0 neutral. With that, I will close the public hearing on House Bill 1150. The committee's going to stand in recess here until 10:30. But what's going to happen is I'm going to meet up with Representative Lane, Representative Bohm. We're going to go over the schedule for next week, get that done. I'm also going to meet with the two leaders of the respective parties and go over committee reports to make sure we have everything. If we do not have a committee report, guess what we're going to do today? And then we'll be back for 10:30 for the work session on campaign finance, the UOCAVA bill. 1596, 1133, and 1091. And then it's the AI bill. Do you know, Representative Lane, do you know if Representative Brennan will be here today? She'll be here for the. Perfect. Okay, awesome. We want to make sure that. Okay, with that, we'll be in recess till 10:30. We don't have to go anywhere because there's only 10 of us, so we don't have a majority. So we can actually hang out here. Okay, 11:30. We're back. Going to open up the work session on House Bill 1596, 1133, and 1091. I tell you what, since we're missing Representative Brennan, let's start with. Let's just tackle the big one. Let's go to 1091 relative to financing of political campaigns. Since we're fresh on our minds, anyways. Okay, so we've done a lot of work on this. I want to thank the ranking member, Representative Lane, for all of this. I think the goal here with this bill, which we know is going to need an amendment, we knew it was going to need an amendment when we signed off on the LSR, because to the previous testimony's point, like you need months to fix this thing. So what we need to do is kind of come to what are the agreed upon, and I'd like to just take what the subcommittee adopted as let's call it agreed upon common principles. My goal for this bill in 1091 is that we get a near 20-0 vote out of committee as close as we can. I want it to be bipartisan. I don't want in here to have controversial policy changes. So an example of that is I don't want to delete the entire section and go to a First Amendment free-for-all. I also don't want to institute the closing the quote-unquote LLC loophole, right? Those would be two major controversial policy changes. So I think, can we start with that? We're not going to make controversial policy changes. We're going to go through and streamline. Is everybody kind of nodding? Yeah, okay. All right. With that, easier, yes, it's easier said than done. So things that came out during the subcommittee meeting, there's 19 different definitions of a political committee. So do we want to start on page 6, line 13, which I think starts with that? Because I think we discovered there was I think actually 13 different definitions of a political action committee. So Representative Elaine, do you want to kind of describe what goes on in this section? We're on page 6. Line 13 starts with registration of political committees. Can you turn on your mic for me?
You have to define political committee. So, and I'm looking somewhere in here, we defined it, and we tried to get it down to at least 3 or 4. And what happened over time is that there are some very common political committees that are regulated by federal law, and we kind of brought them into the state without defining them. And the Secretary of State asked us to get it down to as simple a definition of political committees as we could. So that's what we tried to do, and that's why I commented it was easier said than done. But I'm trying to find the definition.
Page 2. I'm sorry.
That's
Page
what I
2.
thought.
Top
I thought
of
it
the
was-
page.
I thought
Page
it
6
was-
is the registration.
Yeah, so, and just so folks understand, I spent 2.5 hours with the Secretary of State's office going through this bill, and we didn't even get all the way through it for the changes and things that they put in just on the technical stuff. So, I already have a laundry list of things, and I'll bring it up as we get there. But the idea on a political committee, where'd it go? Page 2. And was it people coming together? It's a committee created by a candidate running for office, a political advocacy organization, and there's some thought among us that maybe we don't need that at all, but we're not sure yet. So that one might come out. I put it in there, frankly, as a placeholder so we would talk about it, because I think when we talked about it this summer, we weren't quite sure, and I'm sure Representative Quayle will help me remember, I hope. But, and then the political committee of a political party, and then the committee of a segregated fund established by an organization with a separate legal. So, and then not created by a candidate and does not fall within, and it's,
So that's a catch-all.
yeah, it's a catch-all. So, and then and then there are some other types of committees that come up, but the idea was to, basically, the notion of a political committee is one that's formed by the candidate or two or more people or entities. That's a political committee. They may have different objects. They may be doing direct expenditures as a candidate committee, or they may be doing non-direct expenditures as like a PAC or something like that. So the idea is to try and have as simple a definition of political committee as we could get. And then we would try and define the other types. The other thing that came up was, what is a candidate committee versus a candidate? And I'm not sure that I captured exactly that in here. So, because we talked about, it's very confusing for what a candidate has to do versus what a candidate committee has to do, and which ones applied to which. And we were trying to make it clear, and I'm not sure, quite frankly, that I captured that. So that,
Yep. So we define candidate, page 1, line 15,
yeah,
and then
that's-
candidate committee, which I know it was the disposition of the subcommittee that basically candidate and candidate committee would be effectively interchangeable, right? The terms were the same, effectively, right? Was there any dispute to that? Maybe.
Difference being that the candidate is not required to have a separate treasurer, for example, doesn't have to recruit other people.
Yeah.
So there's still an important difference.
So could we do candidate or candidate committee may instead of shall?
Well, we're talking about definitions here.
Yeah.
In Roman numeral 3, page 2, starting line 4. And it's just defining what a candidate committee is. It's not talking about a candidate. We can talk about definition of candidate later. I have some thoughts on that, which I will share later.
Okay.
I do have a question about on line 5, political advocacy organization to promote issues and ideas that may influence voters' choices. Where is political advocacy organization currently defined? I don't remember.
So that is page 6.
Where's it defined, though? It's that word "may" that kind of
Yeah.
speculative that
Yeah,
gives me
it's
pause.
very broad. I'll give you that.
well, we were also talking about, is it even necessary to have that section in there, given, because the political advocacy is really, it's a political committee. I mean, so is it necessary to even have that in there? That's why I put it in there, but it is defined in here. And in the existing statute, I'm not sure.
I think the purpose of the PAO was to comply with Citizens United. Am I drawing that out of thin air?
No,
Because basically, I'm not trying to have the philosophical conversation. I'm just like saying what the court said, so I don't want to devolve. But the court said in the Citizens United cases that these corporation entities have a right to speech. Speech cannot be limited. So I recall the PAO was formed to encompass that. I don't want to enter in the debates of should we or should we not. We're going to have different views on Citizens United. However, we don't want to do all of this work and then have it tossed because it's not compliant with existing Supreme Court ruling.
so, which is why we're having both the AG and the Secretary of State look at it.
Okay, so the AGs, so they're looking at PAO. Do we need it?
Yes, and they're looking at the bill overall to make sure that we met what they came and did a presentation.
Yeah.
And did we capture everything that they did? We tried, but I don't know. I mean, it's odd, we could have missed it.
Yeah, because the
Same with Secretary of State and the attorney in the Secretary of State's office, it also looking at it in the same kind of view. Is it compliant with both state and federal law?
Yeah.
So,
because the nuanced difference here, so everybody paying attention at home, is there's a difference between if I say, people, you should go vote for Connie Lane, that's one thing, because I've used the magic word vote, or I've used the magic word election. There's magic words. Versus if I say, thank Connie Lane for her strong stance on independent redistricting, right? And if I say that in an election window, it gets interpreted by people as, okay, well, he's advocating for a candidate, but he's not using the magic words.
Right.
So the issue that you run into here is you're trying to define what is political. You're trying to find what is political campaign speech versus what is political advocacy speech. And the reality is the two are very blurred. Yes,
The
Representative
the
Quayle.
question I had a moment ago about where we originally defined political advocacy organization, I just answered it for myself looking through the text of the bill and also the existing election manual.
Yeah.
It is defined in
I'm trying to find-
section 22, Roman numeral 22, on page 5, line 31. So I think it is redundant to also define it under political committee.
Right. And again, the question is, do we even need it? And I don't know if we need it, because oftentimes the political advocacy organization, as Representative Berry pointed out, can come out and try and influence just by saying, you know, we like Connie Lane because blah, 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 or we like, you know, whatever, and that's influencing. But it's not saying defeat or elect. So there's some magic words around it. And frankly, I'm meeting tomorrow with the Secretary of State to go over that exact issue. Like, what can we do? How to do that? Because right now it says defeat or elect, and I think they would just want to stay with that. But in some places in the existing statute, we say influence. So it's trying to get them to be consistent.
Okay. So I guess that's a good question is, do we want to do defeat or elect, or do we want to do influence? Because that's a thing
Right,
we
and
can
then-
figure out.
Yes, influence somebody to, there's an acronym, support, oppose, promote, or I can't, anyway, there's 4 words that mean, and they're a little bit broader than defeat or elect. So, and it might even, so that those, like you said, they're magic words.
Yeah.
So you did find those, Representative Quayle, you found those definitions, and I guess we need to decide whether we even need to keep them.
Yeah, and the current language, I'd have to look, it's hard to look things up while you're trying to speak, but it's a lot simpler than the language in the bill which let's see, where the bill says, tries to influence the election or any measure through support, opposition, promotion, or attack, and includes the following types. The current language is more influence the success or defeat, which I think is a lot simpler and really carries the same meaning. And that opposition, promotion, or attack is used a number of places in the bill where previously success or defeat was used. And I think that would be, I think we should stick with the original language on that. I think it's very clear.
Okay. So we'll stick
and-
with the
and
we'll
we're-
stick with the original PAO language.
And we're talking page 2, line 1, political committee definition. Means any organization that, and here's a phrase that gives me reservations. It says expects to receive contributions. To me, that's kind of a speculative, subjective state of mind that can't be determined. I mean, if we said that receives contributions are actually engaged in the activity, I think that would be, that's something that can be determined by someone outside the activity. Speaking specifically of Roman numeral 3, starting on line 1, if we change that first line to that receives contributions, and going down to line 5, item 2, political advocacy organization. If we took out that part 2 and made that change in line 1, I would consider that Roman numeral 3 to be a good change.
Okay, did you guys understand that? Because I got a little.
Did that make sense? So I would make a change on line 1
On page 2.
and on line 5,
Line 5, do we,
where we just take political advocacy organization out of this list of definitions.
okay, and
It-
then as long as it's, and then decide whether we even need it.
Yeah, that can
Yeah.
be separated out as a different issue. So. Yeah, this is a lot of material in this bill. And we talked about it when you filed it. And I think we discussed this, that the understanding was that we had a short deadline to file.
Yeah.
And there were changes we knew we could all agree on.
Yeah.
And that we needed to file something. So you did the whole thing, and we knew that's what you were doing at the time, as something we could amend to something we could all agree on. That's the process we're in today.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I think
So
I don't think anybody disputes that.
when I suggest removing things, I'm not being critical. You understand? Okay, good. Well, I want to make that clear.
Like the nicest dudes on the committee. Like, one of the nicest dudes.
One of the nicest
I,
people on the
I, I reserve the right to be critical.
I can simulate it anyway.
Okay, so do we have kind of a general understanding on that situation? Which I know is, there's like, this is going to be, like, I'm going to download what we're about to do and like play it as a sleeping for my child, because like campaign, like the intricacies of campaign finance reform. All right, so any other conversation on, let's call the political committees, well, I guess we'll need to come back to the candidate or candidates committee.
Yeah, we should look at the definition of candidate.
Yeah, I would really like those two to basically be the same thing. Like, I can run as Ross Berry, I can run as Berry for New Hampshire, I can run for whatever I want to, as long as it's, we understand what, yes, Representative Bay.
So earlier, Representative Quayle, that maybe my understanding is that one of the differences that if you're a candidate, you don't necessarily need a fiscal agent or a treasurer, but if you're in a candidate committee, there has to be a treasurer. So if you make them the same, can in a candidate committee, can the candidate be also the treasurer or fiscal agent?
Yeah,
Then
so-
they'll make
Yeah.
them the same.
So that is currently the law, which is why
Right.
I think it's distinction without a difference. Because Berry for New Hampshire, I am the chairman, I am the fiscal agent, I am the candidate, I am all three of those things. That's perfectly permissible. You know, it's that's why I'd like to have the, yes, Representative Quayle.
Yeah, one of the higher level concerns I had, or aspects of campaign finance law I trade off in my mind, is one, I don't want to do things, make changes that will create greater barriers to participation.
Yeah.
And someone who's thinking, I want to run for an office or state rep, anything we do to make that more complicated, but that person might discourage them. So I don't want to do that. The other thing that I think you need to consider, in which I consider the main justification for campaign finance laws, is that we want the public to have the opportunity to learn if a candidate might be subject to undue influence. We discussed this a fair bit in our subcommittee meetings. And a way to gauge possibility of undue influence is, well, an example. I think we'd all want to know, I think we have good reason to know if a particular candidate, say, received $1 million in campaign financing from some individual or organization, right? So that we would all wonder if that meant that person was being unduly influenced by the donor. Remember discussing that?
No, I do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the main justification for campaign finance systems. If the public knows this, then they can make their own judgments. So those are two things I want to basically trade off, not increase barriers to participation, but make sure the public has a chance to be aware of the possibility of undue influence. I'm just high level.
I'm trying to bring it back to candidate and candidates committee.
The,
'Cause
the
how
can-
does-
the candidate and candidate committee,
yeah.
they're functionally the same.
Yes.
They currently are now, but I want to keep open the possibility of having just a candidate because it means he can just file his paper, doesn't have to talk to anybody, doesn't have to coordinate. I don't mean this too seriously, but it would mean that maybe someone who's unusually unpopular could still run. I mean, we're not putting a barrier that he has to get someone else's cooperation. That could never happen, of course, but anyway, you see, I hope you see my point.
No, I do. I guess my point is I want them to be functionally equivalent, right? So you can run as a candidate, you can run as a candidates committee. I don't want different filing requirements. I don't
Right.
want different reporting dates.
Correct.
It's-
We agree. We still agree on that.
Okay. So I think we're actually on the same page. We're
Yeah,
just
we are
not-
on that. Yep.
We're just not connected in our speech. Yeah. Okay. So you don't want. Okay. I don't think we need to touch it then because we can address it
If
in the filings.
if we're talking Roman numeral 3, I think that's, I mean, I can accept that with the changes, the two changes we just discussed. So I consider that one. Roman numeral 3, Roman numeral 3A,
Could-
items 1 through 5. And just while we're on the subject, I thought Roman numeral 3B was still fine. You know, organization includes 2 or more natural persons.
Just so you know, one of the comments from the Secretary of State's office was we could delete this because they think it's already defined somewhere else. So if that's the case, just not to have duplicative
Delete
definitions.
B.
To delete B.
Okay.
So I needed to look at that just to see that it's not duplicatively defined.
Sure.
Okay.
But in and of itself, I think it's an objectionable statement. And
It is or it is not an objectionable statement.
is not.
Okay.
Roman numeral 3B is very, an organization has to have more than one person, right?
Right.
There were some ambiguities in the law as currently
Right.
written. I think that would resolve them. And, Mr. Chairman, just a moment.
Yep. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Before we move on too far, when you think it's appropriate, I would like to discuss the candidate definition too.
I mean, as you can tell, I'm a dog after a bone on this, so why not? Let's talk about the definition of a candidate. So we're now on page 1. We're going backwards. We're on page 1, line 15. Welcome to campaign finance. Yes, Representative Quayle, you go.
Roman numeral 2, paragraph D, starting on line 27. Knowledge that any other person has received contributions or made expenditures and for the benefit of the individual and has not notified that person in writing, that would be part of the definition of a candidate. I really don't think that belongs there because it puts the burden of proof on an individual to prove that they're not a candidate or that they weren't aware that someone else did this. I think that goes too far.
I agree because that's an action of another.
Right.
It also it could be very overly broad, where somebody you may not even it's like you have to if they do this to a lay person, if you will, and they don't tell them to stop, then they've become a candidate.
Right.
I don't like the idea of the actions of another dictating that you're now a candidate for office.
I think to be a candidate for office, you have to yourself take some
Yeah.
positive, some actual action to be a candidate.
So the current definition of a candidate, this is an expansion of the definition of a
Yes,
candidate.
it is.
The current definition of a candidate is, quote, candidate means any person publicly declared as such and for whom votes are sought in an election. I actually like this one a little better
Yeah,
because I have said before, you are a candidate long before filing.
Right.
And sometimes,
Yeah.
often long before you,
Yeah.
you say out loud that you're running. So I actually kind of like that better, to be
Yeah,
honest.
and-
Because we discussion about it exploring, right?
Yeah.
So this would basically encompass that. You want to opine on that, Representative Lane?
I mean, that's exactly why I expanded on that definition. And this was, I looked at definitions across a couple different, venues, so to speak, New York, DC, I don't know, I can't remember, but there were like 3 or 4. And I kind of conglomerated them, so, we didn't talk about D, and I think the only reason it's in there is so somebody can't do an end run around and have somebody else collect money for them, and then and you know that it's going on, and you know you're going to run, but you're going to get around it by having, say, Representative Howard, collect money from me if I, God forbid, ever decided to run for another office. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I understand it.
That's why it's there. I'm just explaining why it's there. But if you
Sure.
don't think we need it there, then
No, I would like to get that out of there because the idea that a separate party is doing something and it's triggering you into candidacy just doesn't sit well. But I do like everything else. I do like the expanded definition. I think it's a lot better than what's currently under RSA 664-2. Okay, so does that, Representative Quayle, are you
I think so, yeah, on
you,
that one. Yeah.
satiated on that? I agree. I think it's a good one. So we'll explore if we can remove Roman numeral 3, section B, lines 13 through 16. Representative Lane, you're going to figure out if we can get rid of that. All right. Anything else we want to pound on this? But by the way, in case you're sitting, this is what this subcommittee did all last summer. So God bless them. It's just really dry stuff. All right.
Okay.
Are we good with the rest? Let's look at the definition of communication because I know that there was.
So the language in here about influencing, it, like you said, Representative Quayle, it runs all the way through it. So, just to save time, I'll do a search and try and get rid of them where it makes sense. So, because it's in here too, under communication. It runs through it.
I think so. I think when we talked about, I'm trying to remember last summer, but I think we talked about this. One of my concerns was editorials, right? Do we need a exemption for that, right? So if the union leaders, they were here today, we can talk about them. If the union leader runs an editorial saying, "Hey, go vote for candidate X," right? They're obviously putting that into publication in which they pay for. They're obviously influencing voters, but it's not a paid, we have historically never considered those sort of things paid political advertisements, right? We've considered them editorials, right? So I just want to make sure that when we look at this definition, so the current communication definition, just so everybody is communication shall include but not be limited to publication in any newspaper or other periodical or on any internet site, broadcasting or radio, television, or over any public address system, transmission by telephone or facsimile, placement on any billboards, outdoor facilities, window displays, posters, cards, pamphlets, leaflets, flyers, or circulations, or any direct mailing. So what they do there is they define it. They just define what a communication is, and then in this new definition, it talks about imparting, exchanging, or receiving information to influence the support, opposition, promotion, or attack of a candidate.
So I think it was broader,
Yes, before it was broader, now it's tighter.
and we wanted to include social media and other forums because the definition was a little, at least those my notes indicated that. So that's at any internet site, but it was also I think I expanded it to social media, another digital method. So that is an expansion.
Now, does anybody have any objection to that expansion? Yes, Representative Quayle.
Personally, I thought the original definition was adequate, especially since it's includes but not limited to. But in this definition in the bill, there are a couple of phrases that just I don't think belong there. Yeah, they involve they're forms of communication, but by any means of speaking. I mean, if you're speaking to your neighbor about something political, just the two of you, you're engaging in political communication. Well, you are, but it's not something that could conceivably really be regulated. So that's one example. Or over any public address system. I understood, I think, the intent. It was a good intention, but I think it just gets too particular. And another concern I have with this section of law is that it not be usable in such a way that you could construe someone engaging in protective activities
Yeah.
could be like alleged to have committed some wrongful communication, and that by any means of speaking or writing, by any means, I think
Well,
maybe that's the phrase that really.
so
I don't-
I think what's happening is they're defining communication after they define political advertising. The two probably should have been flipped just structurally, because
I'd love to put them alphabetical if you want me to.
yeah, no. I didn't mean that as a criticism. I think that's what we're getting caught up on
Yeah.
is we don't care about communication. We care about paid political communication, right?
That's how we track it in our reporting system,
Yeah.
is by paid
Yeah. 'Cause
communications.
We don't want to be in the business of policing all political speech. In fact, it would be grossly inappropriate if we did. But we can be in the business of transparency on paid political communications. So we have the definition of political advertising before this,
It's any
which looks like it might be
communication.
the same. No.
I mean, there's definitely overlap, and I kept, actually, one of the things I toyed with was, do we need both? And I think we do, because all we're really doing is to require them to disclose that they did it. Not that they can't say it or do it, they just have to disclose that they did it and how much they paid for it.
But the emphasis in the reporting system is disclosure of
Paid.
expenditures.
Right.
So I just think in this context, the definition of communication is just way too all-inclusive.
What if we put the two together and made it paid political communication? So if there's an expenditure, right? If there's an expenditure by a PAC or candidate, then we're encompassing everything, and that actually then that makes me feel better about the editorials because those aren't technically
Oh, they're not paid.
they're not paid for by a third party.
For example, where some individual was being paid to by some candidate or political committee to speak to an issue. Someone's being paid to go around the street and promote their message to people.
Which would then have to be in a disclosure.
That would be a
campaign.
paid political communication.
Yeah, because they're being there's an expenditure there, right? They're being paid.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And I don't think we ever actually have a disclaimer on speech. I don't think that exists in existing law. Oh, yes, Representative Pruitt, I'm sorry.
Thank you. If there's a concern about internet site not including social media, we need to think about some new ways that people are communicating, like the trucks that drive around. They think they're exempt, they're not on here. Trucks that drive around with a message. So that would, if you're going to try to encompass everything that's a possibility, that needs to be included now.
Well, I think if you put the
If it's
two
paid, you know.
together, if you put the two together, then you can include, expenditure, basically something to the effect of, if there's an expenditure, here's a list of things that qualify, but there might be others. But if there's the expenditure, that's what triggers it. The expenditure is what triggers it. Yes, Representative Howard.
Yes.
So I believe vehicles are covered in Roman numeral 6, right above the definition of communication under the definition of political advertising.
Attached to motor vehicle. It says printed. So What they're saying is that's not printed. They're saying that that's digital. They're playing games.
Gotcha.
They're
Gotcha.
playing games.
We're not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that one too. People can make their own bumper stickers, and they're doing a lot of that now. So that's not paid. People make their own bumper sticker, and should they have to?
No, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
well, it's an expenditure under $1,000.
Well,
They can do whatever
there's
they want.
there's also a specific exclusion elsewhere, I believe in the existing law, but also definitely in this bill, that exempts individuals acting on their own to produce political and disseminate political advertising.
Yeah.
So you could buy a truck, get a sign made for it, I believe. You don't have to hand letter it, I don't think. And you could drive around with that truck that you rented or own and on your own. That's already explicitly exempted later. Just to point that out. But I don't think we can cover everything here.
No.
We can't. One of my personal rules is there is no perfection. You can't cover, not even at any cost. You can't be perfect.
I think RSA 664 in general is an attempt at perfection.
But
So you
well,
see what the-
perfection isn't even really a real concept. But anyway, so I would be content if we just kept communication as the original definition. I think it's inclusive enough.
go
But
back to-
that's my opinion.
I think. I'm
I guess
not.
I would disagree. I
Yeah.
think it needs to include social media and some of the other things to expand it out.
Yeah.
And
No,
But I
I think adding the expansions in there, I mean, that's fine.
Mhm.
I think the objectionable part, not to speak for Representative Quayle, I personally don't really have a problem with it, is the definition in current statute is very, it doesn't deal with politics at all. It's like, hey, this is a communication, right? Like these things are communications. And then what's getting added here that I think is, not to speak for Representative Quayle, but I think it's giving him heartburn, is the part about defining it as imparting, exchanging
exactly.
the information to influence
Yeah.
support.
So so basically it's communication.
So what if we kept, because I think the expansion, like, it just seems kind of silly to let all that hard work go because there was stuff that needed to be added. But could we take
Right, take those two lines basically out, 32 and
yeah, take them,
a part of 33 and most of 31.
yeah.
After means, take that out, take it by any means of speaking, writing, or other means.
You could put in our mobile billboards.
And
While we're there.
I'm sorry, what?
We could put in the mobile billboard trucks while we're there.
Yeah, I don't have an object to all the things in that list, but and this is another place, by the way, where along with section Roman numeral 6, where I think you could replace the list of support, opposition, promotion, et cetera, to success or defeat.
Right,
That's a-
right, I'm gonna have to go through. it
Basically,
too.
I think you could do that everywhere, and it would be simpler too. And we want this, we want people actually
Yeah,
to read it, maybe.
Yeah, I want to talk to the Secretary of State about that, just to make sure that,
Yeah,
because we talked about that, and I'm doing that tomorrow, so
Okay.
I may have to.
Sounds like we'll have a work session next week. Jay, I knew we were going to, yes, Representative Baum.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it should, back to what you said before about paid communication,
Yeah.
because just speaking, I mean, people running for office are speaking at all kind of different organizations, not paying for them or being paid to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, so just speaking is like,
So,
it's,
yeah, you are allowed to say whatever you want.
Right.
So I think,
So are you suggesting that in section Roman numeral 6 on page 28 that we say political advertising means any paid communication? Put the word paid in there?
yeah, because that's we're coming to you just a second, Representative Howard. But that's in my mind, that's the trigger. It's when there's an exchange of money that's when the public interest of who is doing that money exchange comes into play. If I want to stand on the corner here in Concord and say stupid things, I have 100% right to do that. I don't need to disclose that. I can go make my own sign. I can say all the stupid things I want to say, and Lord knows I do. But it's when there's a monetary exchange that is pushing the promotion of that I think then the public's interest of transparency comes into play. We're going to go to Representative Howard first. We'll come back to you, Representative Bay. But that I think that's the committee's intention, right? Like that's how I would understand it. Is we're not going to try to regulate truly free speech, but when there's an exchange of money, then there's a compelling interest for the transparency of the exchange of money. Okay, Representative Howard.
Yeah, so I mean, I would have to agree with you on that, but we do have a situation in the state where there is paid canvassing in a lot of ways, where we have people who may work for one of the parties, and they'll be paid to go around and speak to people.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of important as to why we need to keep that specific term in the legislation. I mean, I think that it needs to be specified that yes, you're paying for them to speak on your behalf, but that's kind of what we're trying to specify there. So thank you.
Yeah, and that would come out in the expenditures report, right? That they pay, we paid so and so to go do this. I don't want to get into the business of adding disclaimers on paid political actual speech. Hey, I want to go advocate for candidate X. By the way, candidate X pays me. It just seems kind of clunky. And how are you going to enforce that? But when there's the receipts and the expenditures, so when we get to the exchange of money after that, we have 2 points of transparency currently. We have the expenditures and receipts form, and we have, for certain mediums, we have a disclosure. My general disposition is if a disclosure can be easily added, it should be added. You cannot easily add a disclosure to somebody door knocking, right? They're usually, by the way, handing out a pamphlet that says who paid for it, not just, they don't always do that, but they usually do that. But generally somebody speaking, I don't think we should be forcing them to do a disclaimer on that. But if it's printed, if it's digital, if it's over the phone, if it's some other medium that's not that person in that moment, I think then we do need the disclosure. So that's the second part of that. When there's that money exchange, is that disclosure part of it. And Representative Bay, you're up next.
Yes, this may be too much in the weed as far as the paid speaking. So does that, because you said the exchange of money that you report in the reporting. So would that cover all, like the fee, if there's a fee? But sometimes you don't have a fee. Sometimes you just cover their expenses. So if the covering of the expenses is something that, oh, here you go, this is for your expenses. So there's that. But we also report contributions in kind. So if I invite someone from out of state to speak on some event for my campaign, and I let them stay in my home or something, I mean, there's an expense to that. So, and then you report it as an in-kind contribution, but monetary value. So does the paid cover all of that, anything that gets reported?
So that would be my understanding is yes, because in-kind contributions is treated the same as monetary contributions. The thing I always advise candidates are the difference between an in-kind contribution and a monetary contribution is the in-kind contribution appears on both sides of the ledger. It's immediate money in, it's immediate money out. Instead of money, it's itemized value in, itemized value out immediately, because you never actually took possession of funds. But in terms of in-kind contributions, that's how it's always been treated. So if in the situation that you bring somebody up to go campaign for you, you pay for their flight, right? You would, the person receiving the flight would in theory have to say they received a flight for their whatever state stuff, but the PAC or the candidate paying for it would then have to disclose, I paid for this flight.
Or if I take them out to dinner.
Yeah, take them out. Trust me, we've had bills about the discussion of appropriate use of political funds before. So I believe was it a corn bake or something? It's getting on the Wayback Machine there. All right. So are we? Anything else on while we're banging this? I'm gonna give this like another 20 minutes, and then I'm gonna put the plug in and move on to the next bill because I know this is how it's gonna go. Representative Rafter.
Yeah, just one question. I'm sort of naive about this, I'll admit that. But on page 2, line 30, it lists under political advertising definition, what is being promoted or attacked, party, measure, candidate, or person. The definition of person includes business organizations. It's a fairly broad definition. So if someone puts out a attack ad against Walmart, seems like that could be considered political advertising under this definition.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because so the reason that's a tough one is if you have a person who's not running for office yet, but you know they're going to, right? And you want to start up on them, right? You know, you need to be disclosing that. But they haven't. Yeah, that's a person is defined on page 6. So let's take a quick jauncher over there.
I think it says natural person.
Person is an individual, collection of individual business organization, club, or any other entity created under the law. Maybe we'd need to add person of public interest. An individual, yeah. I see the point you're making, right? Which is, you know, if I talk bad about my ex-girlfriend, did I just engage in political advertising, right?
I don't, we,
Particularly in my case.
we can't get to
Yeah, we're not going to get to perfect on this.
a complete yeah, we just can't define everything completely.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my feeling on it. And we wouldn't want to, because we don't want human behavior to be that tightly controlled. We don't want that, I don't believe. I don't, at least. You know, if you try to regulate every last nuance of how people interrelate with each other.
So what if
Undue
we add-
influence, that's where I'm,
What if we added to of public political interest, just to kind of add some narrow it down a little bit.
where are we working on?
We're back on page 2. Person of public political interest, because then you can go and trash your ex all you want.
Whereabouts on page 2?
Line 30.
Line 3.
But yeah, I think to Representative Quayle's point, I don't think he's entirely wrong. Like we can get way into the weeds on that but you should be able to say all the bad things about your ex that you want, right?
Election of any candidate or any measure. Is that what we're talking on line 2, you
Yeah.
said?
Or
I think-
person, yeah, candidate or person. Because I mean, the other thing about that is like if you're going after like a commissioner, right? They don't run for office, but you say the commissioner's doing maybe that's a better job than
Boy, I would think that's absolutely protected under
Yeah.
the rights guaranteed by the First Amendment.
yeah, I would say so. Absolutely, you're criticizing government.
I think line 2, it's
Just leave it.
leave it.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I think it's understood there what that means.
In fact, I think we should go back. I've already said this. We should go back to that original language about influencing the success or defeat of any candidate or measure. I think that's where one of the places that was. Right. I think we should. I don't want to get too boring with saying this over and over again, but I still think that covers it. Success or defeat. But that's.
I think what people, particularly with attack ads, they'll come in and say, you know, attack you, but not really use magic words that say defeat or support. So, but they are clearly going for your defeat. But the problem is there's language. I mean, that whole implicit stuff that we took out the implicit because of the court case. So now it's explicit. So does it have to expressly say support or defeat, or does it just in some way talk about supporting or defeating? You know what I'm saying? So that's why they expanded it out. And again, you know, Mr. Fitch was not, he's still thinking about that language too.
Yeah.
So we may have to take it all out anyway, because he thinks it may violate some case law.
I think the language that promotes the success or defeat of a candidate or candidates or a measure, you have a basis there for making a complaint if you can make it stick, to me. If you're putting out material about a candidate that's an attack, you know, is simply printing a candidate's previous voting record, is that an attack? Well, it is, if you disagree with it. It's also advertising
Yeah.
for people who agree with it. So I just think promoting the success or defeat of candidates, or measure, I really think that covers it.
Okay.
It gives you room to make a complaint if you really,
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
and it's simple.
Okay. Let's go to page 3. This will be the last page we'd handle, then we'll move on to other stuff, because, of course.
One other comment, because we spent a lot of time on it, the committee, was whether there's places in the statute that use the term including, and then there's places that use including but not limited to. So we talked about whether they prefer including but not limited to, because it's definite. That's what you're about. And my question was, well, what about something that in 5 years, you know, and they said, well, if that happens, you amend the statute. And I said, that's what we're trying to avoid, is amending it every, 2 or 3 years. But they are leaning towards wanting to put in including but not limited to, and that's something I think we should all talk about. And I don't feel strongly either way. I just want consistency throughout the statute. That's all I really care about.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I think that is a way of really putting in a reasonable person kind of standard.
Yeah.
And, well, I'm not a fan of that because there's lots of variations in what people think is reasonable, but like I said, there's no perfection here. Including but not limited to, if that's what you mean, then if it's appropriate in particular use, I guess you'd have to look at that. There might be cases where you have a specific list. So,
Anybody else have any thoughts on the issue?
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one? That this is what we did for the summer. It was fun.
it was fun.
I actually enjoyed it for what it's worth, but this is like there's like probably 100 people in the state that really are like, whoa, give me Bidens, yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on to page 3, and then we're gonna call it on this bill because we could literally spend.
Could I address one more item after that?
Of course. Yeah.
The next area I would have of any concern is on page 6. So
All right.
when you're ready.
We'll get to page 6 next week, maybe.
Next week?
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, literally, we'll get to page 6 probably next week. We're not going to be able to finish this today. There's no way.
Obviously.
Yeah. All right. Contribution. Everyone want to review the definition of contribution and see if we're all good with that? I don't know does it look like it's changed? It has changed, yes.
So this was include is used here. So what's one issue where we would have to talk about including but not limited to, or it's on page 3, and then also the use of personal resources. And that's something we talked about, but we didn't. It came up in my notes, but we didn't really. I don't think we ever came to any real conclusions that I could find in my notes. So at some point we'll need to talk about, because I'd like to do it in one place, when people use their personal resources, how does that get disclosed? Is there a minimum that will let them spend without reporting it? That kind of thing. So but because in here it says, or the use of personal resources by a candidate on the
Volunteers who
campaign.
receive no pay or the use of, I see what you're talking about. On the candidate's campaign. I actually don't know if that's appropriate to be in there.
What's she talking about?
She's talking about line 5 on page 3.
Mm-hmm.
because this is shall not include the services of volunteers who receive nor pay or the use of personal resources by the candidate on the candidate's campaign.
That's in the existing law, actually.
Yeah, I know.
And if I may speak.
Yeah.
Referring back to a comment by Representative Rafter, I think I understood that, or maybe it was Representative Bay, I don't remember, but might have been Representative Bay. Talked about someone, putting up a candidate. How would you calculate the monetary value of that? I mean, what cost would you put on letting a candidate stay in your, I don't know, musty basement extra bedroom? I mean, well, I'm not talking about anybody in particular's house, certainly not mine, but I guess at some point you have to draw a line about, maybe stick to things that are easily calculable, like an airplane ticket. That can be calculated. I don't know.
Yeah, I know this is the current definition. My only, my concern with it is that that doesn't include, like, we can't have that include, obviously, a self-funding, right? So it's like, oh, I use my own personal money, so this is no longer a contribution. Because we know you're allowed to self-fund your own race to infinity. That's just, you're allowed to do it. And I think that's what they're trying to get at. But it needs to be disclosed.
Right. And that's not clear.
And that's not clear. And I want that to be clear. I think you need to disclose that. I really do. If you are self-funding your race, that's totally your business. But you need to say you're self-funding your race.
But would this cover also, and then how they do it? Like, for example, when we're campaigning, we drive from place to place.
Yeah.
We don't log in all of our miles and the gas that we use or the wear and tear of your car and all of that.
What if we added, like, not the use of personal resource by candidates committee, not for the use of paid political advertising, which is what I want to get back to. Where it's like, so long as, like, if they're using their car, that's fine. If they're putting people up in their house, that's fine. Whatever. It's when they take $1 million out of their bank account and give it to WMUR to run ads that I have an objection to.
Except I don't think we could I wouldn't worry about someone using their own resources
Yeah,
in terms of undue influence. I mean,
that's true.
they obviously influence their own opinions.
That's a valid point.
So I think we're concerned about excessive influence from somebody else. So I don't see a need to get that particular.
That is the current definition. So, all right. We're going to end on communication because that's about all I can handle. And I know if my brain's starting to hurt, others have to be. Any other? Yeah, about as clear as mud. Yeah, it's perfect. It's exactly what you'd expect from RSA 664. She giveth and she taketh away. All right. We're going to come back to this next week. Don't worry, there'll be a notice work session on 1091. So I'm sure they're all worried. So we'll move on. Now that Representative Brennan's here, we'll move on to 1133, which is the AI. I'm sorry, 1596, excuse me. So reviewing this bill, I would like, I have some changes. I could send them over to Representative Brennan. I'd like, thinking about it more and more, I'd like to remove images as being covered by this. Photoshop is already a thing, and I don't think it meets the intent of what we're trying to do because it's not fraudulent. Audio and video, easier to manipulate people. I think people are used to the idea of pictures and Photoshop existing and being skeptical of that. However, when it hits the audio visual, when that component of audio is added and moving picture, it just raises a level. And I don't want, because the definition is so expansive, because it says or other digital technology, I don't want things that are photoshopped to all of a sudden be met with this higher requirement than exists now. I just don't think it's necessary. You want to respond? I'm sure you disagree and want to respond.
I believe that image is important to be there because you can still deceive the voter. And if this is about deception, which it is, as is explained in multiple areas of this bill, I think it's important to keep image in there because you could still be showing an image of someone doing something that they never did in real life. Whether that is a moving image, a static image, an image that has audio attached to it. If you show a photo of someone doing something they did not actually do in real life, the intent is to deceive the voter. And that's the problem. And so I think that we would need to keep image in there if we are looking to limit disinformation going out to the voter that may or may not be fraudulent, appeal to that fraudulent definition, but would be harmful to both the candidate and the public who would be receiving this disinformation, purposefully deceptive.
Other comments, questions, concerns on that? Good. Yeah, go for it.
I have lots of comments on this bill.
Yeah.
But if this is the right place to share them, right time. My general thoughts about this bill is that the criteria that are being listed, terms like, whether some image is realistic or a person should have known it was generated by some something we're calling AI. Well, that's not well defined in my opinion. But or someone made a good faith effort to make sure it wasn't AI. Ordinary people, like in terms of technology, those of us who don't have a deep understanding of this specific area, how would we know that something is AI? I mean, the point of this, I'm using AI, let it be understood. I'm not sure that really means anything at this point, but I'm going to use the term. How do we even, the point of this AI processing is to make something realistic and difficult to distinguish from something that was recorded that really occurred. It's difficult. I mean, what person typically is going to be able to know looking at it? And with disclaimers placed on audio or visual recordings or image recordings, well, if someone can put it in there, AI could be used to take it out too. So I don't see how this can be enforced. And it's coupling with a person. And on page 2, line 8, and where it says a candidate whose appearance, action, or speech is depicted through the use of a deceptive and fraudulent deep fake in violation of paragraph may seek injunctive. It's explicitly encouraging candidates to take somebody to court who shared an image that they may have no reason to believe was fraudulent and could not themselves conclude this. They don't, because looks realistic. And then also can bring an action for general or special damages against the sponsor. Okay, but earlier on, it's on page 1, line 15, it talks about a person. I have this image. It may be fanciful, but I have the image that, I don't know, somebody receives a video through email and says, wow, that's pretty neat. It certainly looks realistic to me, considering what my opinion of that candidate is, and then just distributes it, because there's also the word distribute used in this bill. I guess if you could somehow identify who produced something that was fraudulent, deliberately faked, and focus in on that person, I could see where a candidate might have a cause for action, but not for someone who merely distributes something they received. And there's another term in here, let's see, where is it? Makes a good faith effort. There were just a lot of terms in here that to me are subjective and very difficult to prove what a person did or didn't know when they distributed something. And that concerns me.
Yeah.
It concerns me as a potential, as aspects of this bill that have the potential to chill people's exercise of their free speech rights. So it's kind of, I don't know how you fix that in this bill, but it's a general concern.
So I actually had a meeting yesterday about this bill, and they raised the lawsuit part to me. And that was actually, I have a list of here things. So I think in order to keep going along with this, we need some sort of anti-SLAPP provision. SLAPP is
Strategic.
strategic. You know, it's the frivolous lawsuits.
Right.
So we needed some sort of anti-SLAPP provision. I said, well, couldn't you have it run through the complaint procedure process that currently exists for the New Hampshire DOJ? That kind of met with some pushback, because then it's like, all right, I file a complaint and I go tweet about it. But you can do that now for anything. So we do need to, I think, come to some sort of conclusion, because the SLAPP part of it is actually very concerning. Of you can't eat somebody. We just heard earlier today about you can eat up in court costs. And if the candidate happens to be an attorney, they can file those all day, every day, and it costs them nothing. And the other person gets eaten up. So we need to figure that out. What the is going directly to court the appropriate solution, or should there be some other, I don't know, arbitration, mediation, whatever other process that doesn't involve a lawyer? Or do you put in there some sort of clawback clause of, if you file these SLAPP lawsuits, then you're, that we need to address that. I don't exactly know what the answer is, but it is concerning that you can take somebody straight to court. The use of, I believe the broadcasters did send us amendment language. I'll need to circle that around. I'm in that same suit of, like, if I publish a fake, deep fake AI about you, but I put it on Facebook, is Facebook now liable? So I think these are other things we have to be concerned of. But to your underlying point, which you said at the very end, which is we were trying to go after the person that's creating it.
And I can see some justification for that, but I think it's the appearance of the word person and distribute that really got me thinking about this bill.
Yeah. Representative Bone.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we should be suing the creator, not the distributor, who may not knowing that it's fake. So really, the person that really should be responsible is the creator, not the innocent distributor who thinks it's real. I mean, so yeah, I agree with that. It's the creator that's responsible,
Yeah.
unless the distributor knows that it's fake.
Yeah, and I'll circle around the language from the broadcasters after this, so everybody can look at it, because I believe they had similar concerns, which I think are. I don't want the broadcasters to be in the business of policing paid political advertisements. They're just advertisers in my mind. The onus should fall onto the onus, I believe, should fall onto the person that actually did it, paid for it. Yes, Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a concern similar to Representative Quayle, that it tries to go too far. I mean, we'd go with videos. There's a slight difference between a meme and something real. Spend enough time with almost anything, you can make it look real. And there is issues with just being creative and versus taking advantage of this. I believe I just was reading that the person who did the meme of President Biden talking didn't distribute it. Someone asked him to make it, he made it. Yeah. So I don't even know what his intent was in this, but I'm just saying this is a very complicated situation. And when you try to put something in here that takes care of everything, I don't know where you draw the lines in this thing. It's a jungle out there.
Hence the work session. Representative Lane.
Thank you. I guess if the broadcaster or the distributor knows that it is a fake,
Knowingly.
if they know, then they should not be distributing it. And I don't know whether, I mean, I would hate to have them have to go to court to prove it, because again, that's a barrier, and you'd have to get an injunction. But if they know that it is fake, and it's not satire and it's not comedy, then they should not be broadcasting it. I mean, to me, if you know it, if you know that it's fake, and there's some really good ones out there that, but if they know, or they're told by the other candidate, hey, that's not me, they made that up, at least question it, put a pause button on it, because it can be very hurtful if it just keeps going and the distributor goes, oh, I didn't know.
And
Yeah,
it
no.
also would provide someone with a lot of money the ability to simply pay any broadcaster any fee, knowing that they are going to be able to distribute widely a fraudulent, deceptive deepfake, and they would be able to get away with it simply because they paid for it.
Yeah.
And there's something to this. This is not memes. The robocall was not a meme. It was a fraudulent deepfake intended to deceive voters. This is an area of technology that it's a new age. We're not used to this yet, but we can't sit back and do nothing. So even though this is a complicated subject, and we may not have all of the tools in the toolbox to defend against fraudulent deepfakes, if we do nothing, then the courts, the AG, the Secretary of State, the law enforcement will have no tools in their toolbox to go after things that are intentionally made to deceive voters, to deceive people, to commit fraud. This is an area where there's a lack of statute to deal with this sort of thing. And this is one step forward. And I fully expect down the line, as we become more aware of artificial intelligence capabilities, that there will be amendments to this. There will be further regulation. There will be regulation not only at the state level, but at the federal level. But we have a responsibility to granite staters to provide some kind of action that protects them from being deceived. And that is not only the voters, but it is also the candidates. This is a necessary step, particularly this year. We have already seen that it costs a couple of dollars and 20 minutes to make a deceptive deepfake audio of the President of the United States telling people not to vote. That's step one. There's more coming down the line this year. In fact, the technology is advancing so much that AI technology can be engaging in a back and forth discussion with someone who answers the phone and have information about that person to say, hi, this is Uncle Joe calling. There's been an accident at the polling location. Do not go to the polling location. It is too dangerous. This is your town moderator calling. There is a threat at your polling location. The governor has issued an extension on voting. Don't worry, your vote will can be cast tomorrow. This is the kind of thing that's coming down the line. It's not just a 1-minute recorded audio on your phone with an app. It is a real threat to democracy, and a real threat to everyone. No matter, it's not a nonpartisan issue, but that's the advancement that's taking place here. That you could be having a conversation on the phone with an AI bot made to sound like somebody you trust, telling you not to vote, telling you this or that. And that's where this technology is going. And if we don't take a step now towards some kind of regulation, we're going to be in big trouble.
Okay, so I don't think anybody's saying we don't need to do anything. The fact that we're having a work session on this bill should tell you that we're serious about it, right? If I just wanted to ITL it, I would have sent it to a 10-10 death and we would have moved on. So I don't think you have to worry about that. I think we're trying to get to a place that encompasses those concerns. Some things that you just mentioned are already protected by law. Like if you answer the phone and it's a machine, that's a violation of TCPA because that's an automation. So some of those things are already covered. That being said, I believe we need something in place to get what is truly deceptive, truly intention, but we're, kind of per our conversations about campaign finances, we're walking a fine line of, satire, right? Protected free speech versus actual fraud. So, Representative Bohm.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is already in section shall not apply to a radio, television, broadcasting station, blah, blah, not including cable or satellite television, shall not apply to material that constitutes satire or parody. I mean, that's already in the law. I think what may be needed in these things is go after the creator and also those that knowingly broadcast or copy what they know is false. But but I think it sort of covers, that already in not apply to radio or television and all that. So, I think right now it's a lot of it's there. We might make some minor, but I think it's something that probably should go forward with some corrections.
I think intent is we're trying to wrap in intent here, right? If the broadcaster knows and still does it, that's intent, right? That's different. Versus, if they're handed something and it's just fraud, you're trying to go after the person committing the fraudulent act.
Right.
Not on Edith, who's just forwarding an interesting video, for example, going after persons who are distributing. Could I have just your indulgence for a moment? I have a general thought on this.
Sure.
I think that the only real solution to this problem is that people are going to eventually learn that audio, visual, and image recording is no longer trustworthy as evidence of anything. That's how far the technology is advanced.
Yeah.
And for that matter, phone calls. I mean, my mother would get phone calls, the classic phone call. Yeah, this is your nephew, and I'm in jail. Send me money. I mean, this, and one further thought. I just think this is interesting.
Yeah.
This phenomenon is not new. The earliest example I'm aware of occurred in 1940 in Paris, France, outside an infamous rail car, where indescribably infamous head of state gave a little stamp of his foot out of delight at just having conquered France. And the British took that little film clip and repeated it so it looked like he was doing a little dance. Seriously, this is real. It's not an internet rumor. I just think that's it's an old problem, and I just agree with the general remark by Representative Bohm that we need to focus on going after the people who are perpetrating and creating these frauds. And good luck with that, but I think it's worth making the effort.
Yeah.
Some of them will be stupid and catchable.
Representative
Thank you.
Wood.
Oh, right, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. This is very difficult to do this in a simple manner. We're looking at a technology that everybody is afraid of in this room. This is going to be so unbelievable that everybody's going to know it's false. Just indulge with me. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. The reality is, way over here appears to be reasonable person to depict that something is different here. That reasonable. We have a situation here that we're going to call out all the fire engines, and we don't have even a good definition for it. I think that's what you were mentioning earlier of how we're going to corral the troops around this thing. I think creativity is something that you can't stop. These people are going to create these things. It's art. It's whatever they have in their mind, they're going to create it. If they don't do anything with it, it's not, I'm sorry, I don't believe it's against the law. I'm not a lawyer. So there's a lot of things that have to go together here, you know? And just because someone creates it doesn't mean that they got it out in the public. So I just don't see how any of this goes together at this point.
No, I think it's a very fair point. I mean, creation and distribution together. Like, if you just make it on your computer and it sticks on your computer, who cares? But it's when it's distributed that it becomes an issue. That's a very good point. Anyone else? Because we're going to call it here in a minute and come back to this. Representative Lane.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. As to the definition of a reasonable person, I mean, it's a legal concept, and I'm not sure that we can put it in the statute because, but it is something that's commonly used and commonly known in lawsuits and in the legal environs. So I don't think we need necessarily to define reasonable person in the statute.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I agree. It's a common principle. I mean, they use it for obscenity. You know, and ultimately that is why you have a judge. That's why they're called a judge. They judge if a reasonable person. So, Representative Prudhomme O'Brien.
Thank you. I think this is needed legislation, and I think that people in the community and will, in general, be more wise to this as time goes on. I'm thinking of War of the Worlds. Remember that was
Yes.
even prior to what you were talking about. Would anybody fall for that now? And that unfortunate example you were talking, you know, I hope not. That example that you were talking about with the town moderator call says there's a problem at the polling. Don't go. You can go later. If that's true or not, I'm just thinking of how that would go in my community. I think people would start talking online, calling each other, finding out if that was real. And that recent case at Dartmouth where there was a doctor who was accused of saying some racist things on some video that went viral, and it turned out he was actually in surgery or something and could not have ever done that. And he explained, and people realized it wasn't him. I think people will get more wise to this.
I think that's part of the point here, is to make people aware that this can happen and that you need to have trusted sources of information to go to verify what you're being shown or heard, or, you know, whatever it may be. So in a situation like that, you would want to know, okay, let me call my town offices. But in passing legislation like this, we are getting the awareness out to people so that they know that it's out there, that legislation like this can be a deterrent for bad actors. You know, I certainly don't claim that this will stop all deep fake disinformation, but it's something, and it can stop some. And the threat of a lawsuit may deter someone from creating something, which is why that's in there. You know, I think this is a step in the right direction. And I do agree with Representative Lane that a lot of the language in here is legalese. It's language that comes from lawyers. Because they have acted on this exact language before in court, and that's why it exists there, because, you know, that's what has been successful in the past in front of a judge and in law. So while we may not love all of the language, it's there for a reason. You know, acting in good faith and reasonable, those are things that you can adjudicate.
So we're going to wrap this up here, but I want to end it with this kind of statement, which is when we're talking about this bill in particular, we are talking about specifically political speech, because the thing with the Biden phone call was already illegal. RSA 65940 is about intimidation and suppression of voters, right? So having the thing that you're talking about of, hey, it's your moderator, don't go vote today, that's already illegal. So we are talking we have to put that aside because we've already covered that. The law already covers that. And they should be, it's a class B felony. It's not like it's like a slap on the wrist. Like it's jail time. But we're talking about deceptive political advertising, basically, of misrepresenting a candidate's position. Because if you use that candidate or prominent political figure to tell people not to vote, that's already a violation. It's already a felony. I shouldn't even call it a violation. It's a felony. So anyways, I'm gonna leave that there. I appreciate the committee's indulgence on the sacred week of school vacation. I don't even get school vacation. I can't even say it. School vacation. We're gonna do this again next week. We'll do like another 45-hour on campaign finance, and then we'll come back to and then we'll come back and 45. We will not. I can assure you, it will not be 45 seconds. Nice try, though. Yes. So with that, we'll end this work session. I'm gonna go eat lunch and go make some money somewhere in my childcare center, I guess. So. No, we're not gonna do UConn. All right. Thanks, guys. Adios. We're closed up.